Because almost 193 million people across the world don't have enough food to eat each day, according to a new report from the United Nations. The report, produced jointly by the Global Network Against Food Crisis, which is comprised of the World Food Programme, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, and the European Union, also said that the number of people experiencing food insecurity has increased by 40 million in 1 year, and that it had worsened in 53 countries, with the report blaming climate change, war, and the COVID-19 pandemic.
The findings of the 2022 Global Report on Food Crisis are indeed sobering reading. We see a situation where the numbers related to acute hunger have risen, in fact, to an all-time high. And specifically, we have an increase of some 40 million people compared to the numbers from 2020 who are in a situation of acute food insecurity. So indeed, very, very concerning reading. So we have a series of countries that are in focus. Indeed, there are 53 countries in total that were reviewed in this year's report. There are some countries that come to the top in terms of this mix of the impact of conflict, of extreme weather conditions, and of the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And those are countries such as Afghanistan, such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, such as Yemen, such as Ethiopia. Vulnerable families are not able to access enough food to eat on a daily basis. As a result, they are having to employ emergency coping mechanisms. They're having to sell off assets. They're having to skip meals. They're having to engage sometimes in very, very dangerous behavior. And of course, this situation is also reflected then in acute malnutrition, particularly of very, very young children, those that are under 5. And ultimately, of course, loss of life. We have excess death, excess mortality.
All right. Jinmi Ajayi, who's the founder of FeedUp Africa and an agriculture expert, joins us to discuss further. Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for joining us. So what do you make of this report we just heard there from the Global Network Against Food Crisis?
Thank you very much, Rotus. The report came out just yesterday, and then it speaks to the realities on ground. And I'm happy that they gave the actual figures to what's going on, because out of the 53 countries, Africa has quite a large chunk of the 53 countries that were mentioned. And then it goes on to show that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, not just by NGOs or non-governmental organizations or government. Everybody has to come together and find solutions to these challenges. And then, the report also highlights the impact of COVID-19, drought and climate change, insecurity, as well as the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, because the effect of that crisis affecting exportation and trade, with regards to food products, is also going to further expose the vulnerable groups amongst us.
All right, thanks. Now, you talk about coming together. How can we improve food supplies at a time when countries are restricting exports of particular food? Ukraine is restricting sunflower oil, Russia restricting fertilizer, Turkey restricting, there's a whole bunch of countries, a list of nations that are restricting it. So how can we get past that?
Yeah, this is simply similar to what happened or transpired during the COVID-19 lockdown, with regards to how some regions of the world were more or less like holding on to vaccines for themselves and then for their people. It's more or less like the same thing. However, what needs to be done, perhaps with regards to intensive diplomatic efforts as it relates to trade, all right? Because these, government representatives or policymakers more or less like understand how to interact amongst themselves. And also, we also need to look inwards. So, for example, some of these products or produce that are not, that we can no longer have access to, how can we ensure that people or farmers who are already producing these products locally can be enhanced? Can we support them? But by what I'm talking about, I'm not referring to encouraging new people to go into agriculture and start producing these products. No, that's complete waste of time. How can we improve the capacities of those who are already producing these products? That's what we need to do. And also, perhaps we could as well explore opportunities that the Africa Continental Free Trade Zone has to offer.
All
So
right.
these are some of the conversations we need to have.
Fantastic. All right. So, I mean, you're part of your FeedUp Africa. Can you explain how you're fitting into this conversation to help with food supplies on the continent?
Okay, so FeedUp Africa was set up just last year with to respond to the growing challenges of food insecurity. Not just food insecurity, actually, but food and nutrition insecurity. Because most times we focus on food insecurity. However, nutrition insecurity is also a major challenge amongst us, especially in developing countries, which a lot of African countries are part of. So part of our effort will be to liaise or encourage agricultural practitioners, agricultural and agribusiness practitioners, because these people have close proximity to the rural areas, the most vulnerable. So we are going to be interacting with them, training some of them and then improving their capacities, right? And also, on the other hand, we are also going to be engaging directly with the vulnerables. And by the vulnerables, I mean rural women, young children, including under 5, the outcast. All right. So these are some of the things we're going to be working on to ensure that we find ways of improving the food and nutrition security of our people.
Excellent. All right, so that's on the, I guess, private sector side. What about government? What can the government do to aid what NGOs, private organizations like yourself, FeedUp Africa, and so on are already doing to improve food supplies?
Thank you very much for that question, because it's a very important question. What is most important actually is multi-sectoral approaches. So by multi-sectoral approaches, private sectors are playing their part, government will play their part, all right? And also even you people in the press can also come up with programs to enlighten the masses, the people, so that they understand that the fact that, someone in an urban area, for example, can purchase a plate of meal or food for about 15,000 naira. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're getting the right nutrients. So it's not just about the actual food that they are consuming, but the nutrients that that they're going to be getting out of it. And then multi-sectoral approaches simply means that government is playing their part, and then individuals as well, non-governmental organization, everybody is playing their part. So imagine if an organization or an agency like the National Orientation Agency, for example, fantastic organization, right? Imagine if they're able to push a course, let's say a food and nutrition security course in Nigeria, and then backed by the center, the federal government. Regions are also playing their part. Local governments are playing their part. All stakeholders are playing their part, including traditional rulers, religious leaders, and all. So this opens up opportunity for the new endogenous forms of social development that will even encourage investment by private sectors, players, as well as the government players as well.
Very quickly, a little bit less than a minute ago, what about the structural issues facing Nigeria that is impeding growth in agriculture and improving food supplies? How do we get past that?
That's quite a difficult one, in the sense that there's a lot of challenges facing us at the same time. So right now we have the climate issues, we have insecurity issues. There are some farmers that no longer have access to their farms just because of insecurity. Even down in the south, there are people who are afraid to go to their farms, not because they've experienced direct insecurity, but because of the threat of insecurity. So these are part of the challenges we are facing with regards to food and nutrition security in Nigeria. And also, we also need to ensure that we are not just encouraging or telling people to go into agriculture. We don't really need too many people into agriculture, but the agribusiness side of it, and also we also need people to play along the entire value chain. So we don't need too many people in production. But the people we have in production of agricultural produce, we need to expand their capacities, and then also ensure that we can add value along the line, discover new opportunities along these areas. And it's also going to create jobs for people at the end of the day.
Fantastic stuff. Jinmi Ajayi, founder of FeedUp Africa, thank you so much for joining us to talk about improving food security.